All right, ready to go. So, how is everybody today? Everything from good to amazing. That's awesome. Excellent. All right, so I want to talk about the ODP we just did, the ODP that's coming up, and then I want to spend the rest of the day basically talking about VI, and just kind of getting into some of that. Try that. All right, cool. So first of all, I want to just let you know that I think people are doing an amazing job with these ODPs and with the homework so far. I'm seeing a lot of really hard work, and that's totally awesome. That's the only way to get better at this stuff is by putting in the effort and struggling and getting through the struggles. And people seem to be taking this very seriously at this point of the course, which is fantastic. Let's see. Question about homework 3. Does it need to be one singular file, or can we have multiple scripts and then one that uses those? You can break it into multiple scripts as long as your main script is named stick, S-T-I-C-K, and obviously make sure all the scripts that are needed to run it are in your Git repository. Totally fine to break it up into different scripts. That's a good way to do it. All right, just wanted to mention, I posted a video and I think I made an announcement last week regarding VirtualBox. So two main things on VirtualBox, which is what I'm recommending people use if they don't have a machine that boots into Linux. One, VirtualBox is not always an easy thing to run under Windows. In particular, if you install Windows subsystem for Linux, that breaks VirtualBox. If you install VirtualBox the right way, it breaks WSL. So it's your choice. But if you turn off Hyper-V and one other virtualization thing in the Windows options, and that's described in the video, right? VirtualBox should install under Windows, and it runs pretty nicely. And Linux under Windows actually seems to run faster than Windows itself for me. So that's nice. Let's see, question. All we have to do to submit is make you a reporter. That's correct. Push your repository over to GitLab under the same ID that you used for homework 2, right? Make me a reporter and you should be all set. Okay? If you have not gotten your 20 out of 20 on homework 2, you've got to take care of that because it means you're going to get a 0 on homework 3 because the only reason you have a 0 on homework 2 is I couldn't download your repository. I've sent some emails about that, so please get in touch with me if homework 2 is not 20 out of 20 right now. All right, and so one person says they have VirtualBox and WSL and they both work fine. And I was able to get some things to install under VirtualBox, but I was trying to get Kali, and Kali was struggling pretty badly. And certain versions of Ubuntu didn't seem to want to work well with WSL, but seems to work for some people. The other comment on VirtualBox is by default, at least for me, clipboard sharing and shared files do not work, even if you follow the instructions you find for setting those things up. You need to go and you need to do what's called adding guest additions. It's a CD that you put into your virtual optical drive and load it in, and you run a script, and then magically clipboards and shared folders work. And so on my setup, for example, I have one folder that I can get to from my virtual Linux and that I can get to from my underlying machine, and it's the same folder. So easy way to move files around. Plus the clipboard works. You clip on your actual desktop and you can paste into your virtual environment and so on and so forth. So if you're using VirtualBox and you're struggling with any of those issues, take a look at that video. Okay, it's up in the top of the computer science playlist. All right. Regarding the latest ODP that you already turned in, okay, which was a bash script, had a lot of emails from people, worked with a lot of people yesterday on trying to get their script to run. I just got to keep saying it. Write your statements the way that they're described in the bash documentation on Canvas, okay? That is guaranteed to work. I'm not going to guarantee anything else is going to work, though. There are other ways to do this, but what you see in that document, what we've been doing in class, guaranteed to work, okay? And I just want to show you kind of, you know, one of my favorites that I've discovered. Right, so here's a great little script, right? This is standard bash. The first part of this says if hello equals goodbye, then echo bad. We really don't want that to echo, okay? Because hello is clearly different from goodbye, right? And if I run this, in fact, this will not echo. But here's a very similar looking statement. If hello is equal to goodbye, echo very bad. We clearly don't want very bad to echo because hello is certainly different from goodbye, right? But if I run this, it says very bad, right? Why is it doing that? Because I did not write this the way that it's described in the bash how-to guide on Canvas. In particular, I didn't put spaces around the double equal sign. And this is not doing a string comparison. So you code this up with two things that are equal, and you think, great, I know how to compare strings in bash, right? And then at some point you try to do this with strings that are not equal, and it still acts as if they're equal. Okay, this is how bash will trip you up. And the easiest way I'm going to say to avoid that is be really, really dogmatic about how you write if statements, how you write while loops, how you deal with conditions, how you do arithmetic, right? Stick to the one way that I've described, which I guarantee will work, and then you don't have to worry about, well, can I leave this space off? You know, I saw someone do something with one bracket. Should that work here, right? There's lots of ways to do this. If you want to dig into bash and understand exactly what all of these things do, that's fantastic, okay? If you don't want to do that digging and you just want to know that you can write a statement and it will work, do it the way it's described on Canvas, okay? That's my mantra for today. A couple of people saying commit messages double up when you do them. Come by office hours. I have office hours today. Come by office hours and show me that, because I've heard this from a few people now. And committing in Git should just be, you know, using an editor, typing in a message, it saves it. But I think I've actually seen somebody do this when they were screen sharing. So if you're getting double commits, pop by office hours. Let's take a look at what you're doing. Figure out what's going on. Alright, let's talk about the next ODP. So we're changing gears here. We're going to come back to bash later, but we're going to start talking about C. Okay, we're going to be digging into C code. Your next programming assignment, major programming assignment, will be a C program instead of a bash script. So we're going to start digging into doing input in C, parsing input, getting command line arguments, things like that. And so as a warm-up to that, I'm giving you an ODP 410A, which will let you start working with assessing C code in the assessment system. And so this first ODP is very straightforward. It's literally one line of C code. Okay, and just like the first ODP in bash, I want to go through ODP 410A. I want to show you the code, because the challenge here is not the code itself. The challenge is how do you link it together, how do you assess it, okay? And please, if anything is not clear while we're doing this, grab your microphone and say something, okay? Because this has got to make sense. Otherwise, it's going to be a long night probably, trying all this stuff. So let's take a look at the README first, okay? So this is README 410A, okay? So you're going to write a C function. got a typo in there. You're going to write a C function named inc, INC for increment. Okay? When I ask you to write a function, I'll always tell you what the prototype is. Okay? Prototype basically says what's the name of the function, what kind of arguments does it take, what does it return. Okay? You can name your arguments in here, but it makes no difference to the compiler. The important thing is the compiler needs to know the function name is inc, it takes one argument, which is an integer, and it returns an integer. Okay, and you're going to actually put this into any program that's trying to use your function so that the compiler knows, hey, this person just said INC, what is that about? What is inc? Okay, it'll know that it's supposed to be a function with one input, one output. I'll move my chat window. All right. What does the function do? It accepts a positive integer and it returns n plus 1. It doesn't have to be a positive integer. It accepts an integer, it increments it, and returns the incremented value. That's all it does. It does not print anything. That's really important. Okay? It's like the square root function, it's like the sine function, it's like the string length function. It takes in an argument, it does something, it returns something. It's completely silent, right? String length would be a really annoying function to use if every time you called string length it said, I'm the string length function, I'm calculating the length of this string, right? So most functions are silent. They do something, they return a value, and that's it, okay? Inc is an example of that. So pass it an integer, it adds 1, returns the incremented value. All right, so that's not a hard function to write, okay? We can write it in one line of C code, and we'll do that shortly. As we move into C, you're going to need to test your functions yourself before you assess them, which means you're going to have to write a piece of code that can be used to test your function. So this is something nominally called a test bed. So a test bed is a different program. It'll have a main function in it, right? So it's a program that you can run from the command line, and it will exercise the function you're writing. Okay? You're not going to assess the test bed. The test bed is strictly for your own use. Okay? With scripts, we were writing main programs, so we test it and then we submit it for assessment. But for C code, we're just assessing, in this case, just a function. So we have to write our own test program first, test our function, make sure it works, and then we're going to link that function to the assess test bed. All right, we'll go through these steps shortly. So make your own main function for testing the routine. Test it however you like. Easiest way, just pass it values and see what it sends back. But if you want to get fancier, or if these functions are more complex, you might input things from the user, you might take command line arguments, you might generate random numbers, you might read numbers from a file. It's totally up to you. But do whatever you have to do to test your function, inc in this case, convince yourself that it works. All right? Once you think you're ready to assess, you have to go through these very specific steps. So you have to compile your function inc.c with this file, which is the assessment test bed. Okay? This is a main program that I've written and I'm supplying to you. I'm only giving you the object code, the .o file, so you don't have the source code for this. This GCC statement will say, let's take that test bed, ODP410A main.o, let's link it with my function inc.c, let's make an executable file called inc. Okay, and you're going to use this line verbatim. And then you're going to use the assess command. And assess, again, has two pieces. The first name is the function, the name of the file that you want to assess. This is a runnable program. And then this is the name of your source file. Okay? Once you link your function into the test bed, don't even bother trying to run inc. It's not going to make any sense to you. As we get later in the course, it won't even run from the command line. Okay? It's not for you to test your function with, it's for the assess system to test your function. So if you compile this and you run inc and you look at it, you're going to see weird stuff. Doesn't mean that your function doesn't work. Okay? Run the assess command to see if it works. All right, making sense so far? All right, so let's go through this step by step. So I'm going to make a new directory called ODP410A. I'm going to go into that directory. I'm going to do all my work in here. So first I'm going to make my increment function. Let's see, question, if we didn't link to your object file, would it create one based on our program? If you don't link to my object file, then what are you going to assess? Because if you just try to assess inc.c, it's not going to be even executable. If you link it to your testbed and you run it, it'll probably assess 0 out of 10. And no, it won't link it for you because your thing that you're testing might have more than one piece in some cases and so on. So you have to submit a runnable program where you've linked your code to the test bed. Alright, so here's my increment function. I could jam this all on one line if I wanted, but I got fancy and put it on 4 lines so I could indent. So it's an increment function. It takes in an integer, n, and then it just returns n plus 1. Okay, I don't need to prototype this function because I'm defining the function right here. I'm not calling it. Okay, so that's my function. I need to test this, so I'm going to make a test program. Do not call it test. Okay, test is a reserved word in Bash. It'll mess you up. So I'm just going to make a program called main.c. Going to do my usual include. I'm going to prototype my function. I'm going to tell the compiler, hey, when you see the word inc, it's a function, it takes an integer, it returns an integer. Alright, I'm going to call inc10, I'm going to save the result in y. And I'm just going to print a simple message here. I'm going to say inc10 returned %d, and I'm going to print out the value of y. Now this is not very extensive testing. I'm calling inc once with one fixed number, and I'm checking to see if it returns 11. Okay. For my inc function, that's probably fine, but you know, it could be that my function always returns 11, so I should probably test this for more than one case. But let's start simple. Let's just test this one. Okay, so I'm going to say gcc-o main.c inc.c. Okay, so this is important. Main.c, that's the test bed that I just wrote. Inc.c is my function that I wrote previously. Right? This is my own test bed. This is my function that ultimately I'm going to assess, but I'm not at the assessment point yet. I'm just testing this myself. So if I run main, it should say inc10 returned 11. That's good. I'm pretty happy with that. If I want, I could do a few other tests. Right, so I can pass it some more values. I can recompile, I can rerun, I can eyeball these. Okay, 20 return 21, -1 return 0, -17 return -16. I'm pretty confident now that my inc function works the way that I think it's supposed to. Alright, so let's go back and look at our README. When you're ready to assess, what do? We're going to do this. We're going to compile, we're going to link inc.c with the test bed. and call the executable ink. Alright, so I'll do that. And now if I look, right, I've got ink.c, that's my function. I've got main.c as my test bed. I've got main, which was the program I was testing. I've got ink, which should be the runnable test bed. Alright, so let's assess it. Assess ink, ink.c. Double check you're about to assess your code for ODP 410. Ink function test. Go ahead and do your G for grading. 10 out of 10. We're good. If I assess with my own test function, right, I ran main, it looked great to me. I ran it, it showed me ink of -17 was -16. If I try to assess with that, right, and I submit it for grading, I get all kinds of stuff ending with a 0 out of 10, right? So you can't assess your own main program. You have to assess the test bed. And by the way, now I've got a 0 out of 10 sitting in the grade book. So if I'm playing around with this and I'm curious what happens if I do this, right, make sure that you go back and you get your 10 out of 10. I think I changed it so it records your highest score now, but I'm not sure that works yet. So make sure you got your 10 out of 10 as your last score for the assessment. Okay. If I try to run ink, nothing happens, right? Ink is not for me to run. Ink is the test bed that I'm feeding to assess. So don't try to run that yourself and make sense out of it. Okay. All right, that's all there is to it, but it's a lot, right? The increment function is not the challenge, okay? Take an integer, return the integer +1. The challenge is, you know, testing it yourself with your own main program and then linking it to the test bed and then assessing that. All right, questions on any of that? So try that sooner rather than later, okay, because I'm going to have limited availability towards the end of the day. So try that sooner rather than later. Let's see, comments. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about VI. So, I made some general comments the other day, but I'll repeat them here. The reason I want to talk about VI, so you use VI in CSE224A, and a lot of people, you know, switch over to using Notepad, Notepad++, they go back to using Nano, or they switch to using an IDE, like Eclipse or IntelliJ or Visual Studio or something like that. These are all good options under different circumstances, okay? You're always going to have access to VI, right? VI has been around for decades. It's a standard part of every Linux system. It's always available, and it can be extremely efficient, okay? It can also do things that people like having IDEs do. It'll do syntax highlighting, it can number lines, it can check your typing, and so on and so forth. You can make it very fancy, okay? But just as a simple bare bones editor, VI is extremely powerful. And you know, when I was in school, there were all these editor wars. So it was mainly VI versus Emacs, and it was like religion, right, or politics. People would get very, very in love with their favorite editor, and they could see nothing else, right? And you'd go to someone who used Emacs, and you'd start doing something in VI, and they'd be like, you know, get a real editor, man, and vice versa, right? So, and there's no one editor that's better than the others, but VI is always available. It's pretty well standardized, and you can do a lot with it, okay? And it can have a very low, very small learning curve if you approach it from the right mindset. So why do I even bother talking about editors? Because, you know, you can do your editing with VI already, right? The fact that you passed CSE121 and you're making progress in this course means that you're able to edit. The goal in talking about this is, I believe that you're best served by an editor that lets you enter code, lets you modify code, but doesn't get in your way. Okay, this is my kind of mantra about everything related to working on a computer. You should not be spending time dealing with the computer. Okay, you should be spending time writing code, analyzing code, looking for bugs, running test cases, not fighting with your tools. Okay, so let's talk about VI. So I'll just pick on my bash RC as a sample file to play with. So VI, name of the file you want to execute. Okay, that's how you get in. I think everybody knows that. Biggest thing that I can suggest with VI is be aware that there are two modes for working in VI. Okay, this is the main thing. There is command mode and there's insert mode. Okay, insert mode is the mode where everything you type goes into your file, right? And typically we type an I to go into insert mode, and now everything that I type, you know, becomes part of my file. And if you set things up correctly, you can use your arrow keys while you're in insert mode. You can use your backspace key to delete. Okay. And most people spend their entire life in insert mode. Okay? And this is a mistake, in my opinion. If you're in insert mode, all you can do is insert, move around, and backspace to delete characters. And so, you know, if I want to get rid of an entire line, I have to move over to the end of the line, and then I have to backspace back to the beginning of the line. And then I have to come down one line and I have to backspace. That's a pain, right? And so you end up with files that have, you know, dozens of blank lines sitting in the middle or sitting at the end, or things in weird columns, right? Because it's a pain to do that kind of editing. It's a pain to move things around. It's a pain to make things line up. All right, so insert mode should really only be when you're typing things into your file. And if you're not typing things into your file, hit an escape key. Get yourself out of insert mode. Okay? So stay in command mode as much as possible. Try this out. Okay? Stay in command mode. When you're ready to insert something, type an I or an A or an O or whatever to type in some text. Type in your text, hit an escape. Go back into command mode. Okay? This takes some getting used to. If you think that you're in insert mode and you start typing and you're actually in command mode, your file will do all kinds of things, and you know, you'll destroy your work and so on. So it takes some getting used to. And again, this is not dogma, okay? I'm going to offer these suggestions. I'm going to say, try them out, okay? When you have some time, not when you're, you know, facing a deadline, but when you've got some time, try these things out. See how they feel, see if they work for you, okay? All right, so we want to stay in command mode for the most part. Let's talk about exiting. So how do we? Oh, I gotta fix that tool. All right, let's talk about exiting. How do we get out of VI? So you've got to be in command mode first of all. There's a few ways to do this. Okay, if you just want to quit, :Q. If you've made changes, it won't let you :Q. But if you don't want to keep those changes, for example, you know, I'm playing around with my file here, but I didn't really want to change it, :Q!! Okay, that gets you out of your file without saving any recent changes. And now I go back in my file and it's the way it was. You can move around, you can look at things. If you haven't made any changes, :Q gets you out. Okay? The absolute worst way to get out of VI is :WQ. I would say the only time you want to do that is if you want to write whatever changes you've made. If you don't think you've made any changes, don't do :WQ. Right? Because if you've inadvertently deleted lines, changed lines, added lines, and you say :WQ, those get saved in your file. Okay? And that may not be what you want. So if you want to get out of your file, :Q. If you've accidentally made changes and it says, you know, you've got unwritten changes, and you didn't mean to make any changes, :Q exclamation mark. Okay? The only time you want to make changes is, the only time you want WQ is if you want to save your changes. So I added a new line at the top, I want to save that. I can save it now with :W, or I can save it and quit with WQ. Alright? So basically W is write, Q is quit, exclamation mark is, yes, I mean it. So :W writes, :Q quits, :WQ writes and quits, and an exclamation mark after any of those forces VI to do what you've just asked. All right. Let's talk about you go away and you come back and your Linux session has vanished, and so you reconnect. And you want to edit your file, and you get this message, right? And it's got a red banner, which is very worrisome, and it says, you know, swap file, blah, 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 and all kinds of warnings and stuff like this, okay? So this happens if you're in the middle of an editing session and your session terminates unexpectedly. And it may just mean, you know, that your internet connection went out and you got disconnected, but it could mean that you have changes you've made to your file that haven't been saved, okay? So here's my suggestion. When you get this, say abort, okay? Get out of here first. And make a backup copy of your file as it is now. So we were editing this file called test. Let's copy test.backup, okay? Just to leave things exactly as they are now before you do anything else. Now go back into your test file, and it will say you can open it read-only. Okay, let's open it read-only. So I'll type in O, okay? It's not going to let me modify my file right now, but I can look at it. And this is the way my file looks at this point, okay? This should be what's in my backup file. If that looks fine, I'm good to go. If I made 200 changes and those are all missing, :Q to get out of there, go back into test, try the recover option. Okay, so try an R. And it will try to recover what your changes were, okay? In my case, I had put a few blank lines in here. Hey, there's my changes, I like that, okay? If you want to save those, write those out. Okay, now if I look at my test file, it's got my changes in it, right? I can VI test, I can say open it for read only, and I'm happy. This is the version of test that I want. Okay, so every time I open test, it's going to give me this message. Okay, and the issue is that there's a file in my current directory named .test.swap. That's a file that's created when you start editing, and so if your edit interrupts partway through, that file is still sitting around to say, hey, you got an interrupted editing session. All right, so let's abort out of here. If I do an ls-a, there's the file that's causing that message to appear. If I'm totally sure that I've recovered the file that I need and I'm happy with the way my file looks right now, right, I can just remove that. And now when I try to edit test, I don't get that message anymore. All right. The other thing is it'll give you an option to to delete it sometimes. Okay. So if I recover, then it'll give me an option. Oh, it didn't. Well, anyway, just delete it from the command line, right? Once you're sure that that's what you want. So do an ls-a, find your .test.swap, remove that, and then your message goes away. All right, this would have been good to know last week. Yeah, this pops up all the time, right? And it's a pain to live with. So figure out how to get your file back, get rid of the swap file, and then you don't have to look at that message. Let's see, someone else says I constantly use :X, but it's very intentional. If you're not good at keeping track of whether or not you've made changes, then yeah, maybe don't do it. Yeah, so :X is another way to write your file out. 2 Shift Z's sometimes is a way people use to write their file and exit. Whatever works for you, right? I think the important thing is to try to not be in the habit of always writing your file unless you've changed it. If you're using VI to look at a file, don't do a W to exit, right? Because there's a chance that you've changed it. So :Q gets you out. Right? Don't try to use Control-C to get out. Don't ever use Control-Z. Control-Z will get you out, and that's where you get into trouble and you start getting swap files. We'll talk about processes next week or the week after, and that's when we'll figure out what Control-Z is all about. But don't use Control-Z. If you accidentally use Control-Z, say FG to undo it. FG is short for foreground. Puts you back where you were. If you do Control-Z and you don't know what else to do, right, you'll get a swap file at some point, recover your file, delete the swap file, you're good to go. Alright, let's talk about moving around in VI. So we know that we can use the arrow keys, right? And we know that that's a pain, that's kind of slow. So there's other ways to move. So first of all, the kind of official way to move around in VI, 1 character at a time, is H, J, K, L. H is back, J is down, K is up, L is to the right. So J moves me down, K moves me up, H goes back, L goes to the right. Okay. I do use J to go down, I use K to go up, H to go back. I mostly use space to go to the right. Alright. If you're set up correctly, you can also use home and N to get to the beginning or the end. But you can also use a caret, that's a Shift-6 to go to the beginning, right? Or a 0 to go to the beginning, and $sign to go to the end. And when you're done with this course, $sign will be synonymous with end, because it's used all over in Linux for the end of a line, the end of a file, and so on and so forth. So Enter will also move you down 1 line, but also brings you back to the beginning of the next line. So K and J don't move you back and forth left, right. They just move you up and down. If I want to move down and also go to the beginning, I can just use an Enter. Okay. Or, of course, I could use a J, and then I could use a 0 to go back to the beginning. Alright, so HJKL move you up, down, move you 1 character at a time. Enter moves you down and to the left. $sign is the end. Caret or 0 is the beginning. Alright, but moving a character at a time is kind of inefficient. So W will move you a word at a time. So every time I hit a W, I move over a word. And that wraps from line to line. So if I just lean on W, you know, I kind of rapidly go through my file. So let's say I wanted to change file name. You know, I can hit my arrow key and wait until my cursor gets all the way over to file name. And then I can, you know, back it up and do something, right? or I can just hit W a few times, and there's my file name. And B moves you back a word, so if you overshoot, just hit a B, you go back one. So W moves forward a word, B moves back a word. Okay? All of these commands you can put numbers in front of. So I could say 5W and move over 5 words. Right? And get to where I'm going really quickly. I can go back 3 words by saying 3B. I can go up 6 lines by saying 6K. Alright, I can move forward half a screen by saying Control D for down. I can do Control U for up. Okay, fast way to move through your file. You can also do forward with a Control F and back. Those move you an entire screen. I actually never use those. But Control D, Control U, quick way to move through a file. Alright, so now I've got a really long file with almost 600 lines. Control D lets me go through really quickly. Alright, I can also go to a particular line with an uppercase G. So if I want to go to line 17, I can say 17 uppercase G. I'm at line 17. Okay, and you can see that down here. It's showing me I'm on line 17. If I want to go to line 212, I can say 212G. I'm at line 212. This is really useful when you compile your code and you get an error and it says, you know, error at line 84. Type 84 uppercase G, you're at line 84. Right? You can do this, you can have line numbering and you can move up and down until you get to 84, but this is immediate. Okay? This is telling the computer what to do and the computer does it. As opposed to having the computer tell you what thing's happening right now and then changing things until what's happening is what you want. Right? Which is what happens when you scroll up or down to try to get to line 84. Alright? If you want to get to the first line of your file, it's just 1G. If you want to get to the last line, I don't know what the line number is. Just hit a Shift-G, that always takes you to the last line. And while we're talking about the G's, Control-G gives you information about your file. So it says I'm at 90% of the way through my file, line 517. My file has 569 lines and it's been modified. Alright, let's see what's going on in chat. Copy and paste coming up soon. Yes, you can have your mouse working inside VI. I would say try doing this without a mouse for a while and see what you think. Sometimes it's nice to have the mouse, especially the scroll wheel, for moving around. Control D is still a really fast way to move down. Control F is even faster. All right. So let's see. We got 5 minutes left. Okay. Inserting text. So most people use the I instruction to say, let's go into insert mode. This is a test. All right. If you want to add something to the end of this line, and you say I, it's going to start inserting before that T. So how do you add something to the end? Well, the command A puts you into insert mode, but starts appending after your current position. So I inserts before your current position, A appends after. Okay, so that can be handy. If you want to start a new line, just type a little O. That opens up a new line below where you are. And if you want to open a line before where you are, use an uppercase O. Alright, so I inserts before, A appends after, little O opens below, big O opens above. Alright, time for my usual disclaimer, right? There's a zillion commands inside VI. I suggest your goal is not to learn all zillion commands. Your goal is to find a subset of commands that works for you. Okay? I suspect if you do more than just using the arrow keys and the backspace key, you'll find that you have a better time in VI. But I can't tell you what the magic set of commands is that you should learn. For me, it's, you know, probably fewer than 24 commands. It's probably like 15 commands that I use in VI. But they work for me, and I've learned to use them, and so, you know, I feel pretty efficient with those. For you, it may be a totally different set of commands. That's totally fine. But I'm offering some options here, and you can find these in a video on my channel. Put them in your bag, right? Scribble them down on a piece of paper and play with them once in a while. Okay, see what works for you. And the things that make sense to you, you'll use a lot. The things that you don't, you'll forget, and that's fine. All right, really useful command. So let's say I want to change this word backup. CW lets you change an entire word. So CW deletes a word and puts you into insert mode. Right? So DW just deletes a word. CW deletes but then leaves you in insert mode. So it's change word. A Shift R puts you into replace mode. It's like when you hit the insert key on your keyboard, it lets you overwrite. All right. This can be nice for making ASCII art because you can, you know, make a box with asterisks in a border, and then if you use Shift R, you can replace the spaces with text, and it won't move things around. That's the main thing that I've used it for. Lowercase r just replaces one character. So if I want to replace this with a 1, I can just say R1, and it'll replace that. And you can use numbers everywhere, right? So if I say 15, add hello. Oh, that didn't work. Yeah, so it adds hello 15 times. And most of these commands, you can put numbers in front to repeat them. All right, deleting. X deletes a character. If I'm at the end of a line and I hit X, it deletes that last character and it backs up. But if I'm in the middle of the line, X will delete one character. I can delete multiple characters. 5X deletes 5 characters. I can delete an entire word with DW, and that's a fast way to get rid of stuff. I can delete to the end of a line with a Shift D, and I can delete an entire line with DD. So if I want to get rid of these lines, DD, 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 DD. Okay. By the way, a period repeats your last command. So if I want to start deleting lines, I can just hit periods. Every time I hit a period, it deletes a line. All right, if you've deleted something, let's say I deleted this line, I can go somewhere else in my file. If I type a lowercase p, it will paste what I just deleted. So delete is also like a cut, and then p is like a paste. So if I delete these 3 lines, and I go up to the top of my file and I say p, it pastes those 3 lines right there. And if I say P again, it'll paste them again. A Shift P will paste before your current position. This is a recurring theme. Uppercase comes before, lowercase comes after often, right? So I can delete this line. I can go down to the bottom of my file. I can paste it right there. I can delete this line. I can go up to the top. I can paste it before with a Shift P. Okay. If you don't want to delete your line, if you just want to copy it, Shift Y will put it into what's called the yank buffer. That's the clipboard now. So Shift Y will copy this, and then I can come down here and do a P, and it'll paste it. If I want to yank 6 lines, I can say 6 Shift Y. It'll grab 6 lines. Now when I say P, it'll paste those down here. So copy and paste is built in. All right, we are out of time. I will go through a little bit more tomorrow. I'll go about, I'll talk about searching, and I'll also talk about command line operations in VI, which is where we get into sort of the real strength of VI. So we'll continue this tomorrow, and then we'll switch over to C. All right, thanks. Have a good one.